light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I'm Sister Who. I was, at one point in time, I was attempting to start an autism support group in my own home in a particular small town. And only one person responded and said that he didn't want anyone to know that he was there because of the stigma that might be associated with him if he told anyone he was autistic. That there was so little understanding of autism in that town that he would be perceived as less capable or less intelligent, less able to deal with life, that he has a mental disability, and to which, of course, I would say, do you have any idea what that means? And but they didn't. They didn't have any idea what it meant, and so he didn't want to tell anyone that he was autistic because of the ways they would count it against him and give him more limited opportunities and more limited resources and not treat him like a whole person who was capable of living an independent and full life in whatever way he chose. And it raised the question in my mind of how much do we cater to social stigma? If everyone, which of course is never everyone, it's maybe the majority of the people, but it's never all of the people. If it's something that people would count against you, but you yourself don't see it as a negative quality, do you choose to live openly and let everyone know and try to educate them, or do you try to become the embodiment of their expectations and hide this quality so that they don't count it against you? And obviously there's some things that can be hidden and some that can't. And I don't think anyone should have to hide anything. I think living life is about having integrity. And to do that, one must be free to be all of oneself in whatever creative or whatever ways of self-expression one might choose, religiously, creatively, even politically. And yet to conduct oneself with integrity in a way that respects that everyone else is not just like me, that we are all as unique as snowflakes, and they are as different from me as I am from them. I was in a situation once where we were dealing with language translation, and the comment came up about someone having a very strong accent, and I kind of laughed and said, so do I have the accent or do you? And of course we both do, because it depends on which perspective you're viewing the situation from. But in each case, and with the whole issue of social stigma, if you try to be the embodiment of others' expectations, and if they expect that because you have a disability such as autism, that means there are certain things you can't do and certain things you can do, and without asking you if any of that is true for you, they step in and presume it's true and begin limiting you and putting you in a box. And at some point you may say, hey, wait a minute, I can handle that just fine. Give me enough room to do it for myself. And instead of saying, can you do this? And standing back to see how you do. And if you do it well enough to suit you, that should be good enough. If you're not doing it to their standards or as perfect as they might do it. If someone wants to play the piano and they want to play a simple song on the piano, and there's someone in the room who is a concert pianist, I would hope that that person has the grace and maturity to say, play whatever's in your heart. This is not a competition. It's not a question of who's better. It's a question of all of us participating in this wonderful, magical thing we call life. The problem, though, comes back to the innumerable small towns around the world, probably, where if you have certain qualities, people will project a category onto you that limits you and that keeps you from doing everything you want to do and being everything you could be. And so do we give in to that, or do we stand up to it and in a sense, come out of the closet about who and what we are and begin to make it a point of education that you need to understand that I can do this, and that that limitation does not describe everyone in whatever category that is. I have a friend who has now achieved a doctoral degree and is an incredibly motivated and intelligent person, and I think she even won a silver medal in cross-country skiing in the Special Olympics many years ago. Just an amazing person. And yet she's been blind since birth because her mother had rubella, I think it was, before she was born. And so she described herself once as a rubella baby. Well, that rubella baby grew up and has now a doctoral degree and has taught at the university level and all sorts of things. But we were discussing once about visual impairment and the social stigma that people assign to it. And a couple different incidents come to mind. I hadn't planned on addressing the subject in this way, but I'll share the incidents because maybe this is where the show was supposed to go. There was one time where she and I and another friend were at a large department store during the holiday season because she wanted to purchase a topper for her Christmas tree, some ornament to go on the very top of the tree. And I said, well, how would you normally do it? And she normally deal with this challenge, and she said normally she would order it online and have it shipped to her house. But she needed one right away because she was putting the Christmas tree up the next day and needed something for the top. And so I said, we can go to that department store, but it's going to be, this situation of all these people and all, the peculiar environment of a major department store. And so because she was blind, my friend was on one side, I was on the other, and we were guiding her down the aisle. And the ignorance around relating to people with blindness, with any kind of visual impairment, was almost laughable. I mean, I wish I had a video camera because it was so absurd and so ridiculous. We are coming down the aisle, and it is like the parting of the Red Sea. People are literally jumping out of the aisle in front of us to clear a path, as if we had something contagious or something. They were looking so absurd. It was funny, but I thought it was kind of sad and ridiculous. So we got to the aisle where the tree toppers were, and we're opening the boxes so that she can feel them and decide by the shape of it which one she would want on her tree, because of course she couldn't see them in detail. And so after she has felt the ones that she wanted and picked that one, it wasn't like we were doing anything in a way that damaged the merchandise or anything. We were just allowing for a tactile experience in her shopping. So then we're going back to the checkouts to buy this one tree topper, and again, people are leaping out of the aisles in front of us as if there was something dangerous about a blind person coming down the aisle. We got to the cash register, and everybody vacated the aisle in front of us, so there's no waiting because the line disappeared. And I just thought, you people, do you have any idea how ridiculous you're being? And the young cashier on the other side is leaning back as far as she can away from us against the far side of the checkout counter, reaching with her arm all the way extended to touch the buttons on the cash register and not saying a word. And so I'm watching, and as we're checking out, I'm informing my friend that yes, she's handing you the correct change. I can see it. It is the correct change. And so we got our item and went out. But the whole thing was such a circus. And I explained it to my friend afterwards, and she said, why would they behave that way? And I said, well, because most of the time they don't deal with blind customers. You're probably the first person who's visually impaired who has come into the store in God knows how long. And I stumble back and forth because to me the terms are interchangeable, but I understand that the correct term is visually impaired. And blind is actually something that refers to a lot more than just your visual acuity. But I was talking with my friend once because I was at her house during the holiday season, and I described something that was on the table, and she leaned over and said, oh yeah, that's right. And I said, wait a minute, you're supposed to be blind. And she said, oops, I forgot. And it was funny, But as we were talking about that, she said, yes, actually, I think she said it was only about 20%, or was it 10%? It's only like 10 or 20% of people who are listed as visually impaired have no vision, where they can see absolutely nothing, where it's just black. For all the other 80% or so, there are different visual impairments that prevent them from seeing enough to drive a car, enough to conduct themselves through life without using a white cane. There's a visual impairment that can't be corrected by surgery or any other means, and so they're listed as the visually impaired, but it's not that they can't see anything, it's that they can't see enough. There were a lot of times where I would go to visit my friend who was visually impaired, and if I was standing in the front door with the light outside behind me, she could see the silhouette, but she couldn't make out the details of my face. And so again, it was a certain degree of awareness of whether or not someone was there, but not enough awareness to be able to live as a person with no visual impairment. I think if you tried to tell her how much of a limitation it is, however, she would probably throw a book at you, because she has not been willing to be limited by that disability at all, but has gone on to get a doctoral degree, traveled the world, all sorts of things that were just amazing. In a similar sort of way, I tried to start an autism support group, but I couldn't find anyone in that small town who would come, because they were so afraid of how people would count it against them if they were open about being autistic. And I said, well, to me, whether it's about having a disability or being gay or being transgender or whatever it is, the individual who's going to live with the consequences has to make the choice of when and how to, quote, come out of the closet, as it's said. Because they're kind of like having a secret in a closet with the door tightly shut until they're willing to step forward and say, I am, and it's the way it is, and there are accommodations that may need to be made, but I'm not going to live in a way that allows this to limit me. I'm going to pursue my dreams. I'm going to do whatever I can. And it's kind of like a poster I saw back when I was a teenager that said, only those who will risk going too far will ever find out how far they can go. And going back to the historical person of Helen Keller, she was both deaf and blind, and was kind of treated like a family pet who couldn't do anything until Anne Sullivan came along and introduced her to a world in which she could communicate and she could perceive and she could understand, and blew everybody's minds by taking Helen Keller to a level where she became a powerful speaker and writer and a deep thinker and an amazing woman. And even to the point that she learned muscle memory and vibration in such a way that she actually could speak, even though she was both deaf and blind, visually impaired to the point of seeing nothing. It's amazing what can be done if we're willing to try. But how do we deal with the social stigma? And to me, the only acceptable way to deal with it is education. To have somebody who has the courage and the determination, like Helen Keller, to step forward and say, I am me, and this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. And over the course of her life, she expanded what she could do beyond what anyone thought was possible, and was doing things that people thought were impossible. And I recall a YouTube video I saw of a young woman named Mandy Harvey, who was born with hearing, educated herself in music, and then had some ailment or something that happened that took away all her hearing, and she couldn't hear anything anymore. And at first she wanted to give up, and then decided that no, she wasn't going to give up. She was going to try and become the most that she could be. And in this YouTube video, she was part of a competition where she was being allowed to perform and demonstrate talent and see what they would say about it. I can't remember if it was America's Got Talent or some other title, but it was one of those competitive shows where people perform and show what they can do. And so she came onto stage and she's talking with the judges in a very clear tone, and it totally amazes them when and the one judge asks, "So who's this person over here?" And she says, "This is my interpreter because I'm deaf." And another judge says, "That's why you took your shoes off, so you can feel the vibrations through the stage floor." And she's like, "Well, yeah." And so then they decide, she tells her story a little bit, and they say, "Fine, go ahead and perform." And she performs a song that she has written absolutely perfectly. The tone, the rhythm, everything, with a piano player and a bass guitar player. And the audience at the end is on their feet cheering because they're so thrilled at what she has just done to totally redefine life experience for everyone who's deaf, and show them that, yes, you too can be a really exceptional singer even though you can't hear yourself sing. And the judges didn't even hardly deliberate. The judge, who is usually the most cynical of the bunch, for those who are familiar with that show, his first response was, "I don't think you're going to need an interpreter for this." And he hit the gold buzzer. That means she's absolutely won without any discussion or anything. She's absolutely going to the final round of competition. And of course, it was the most incredible thing. But to do things like that, you have to find someone like Mandy Harvey who's willing to stand up and say, "I'm me. And I'm here because this is what I can do, regardless of what limitations you may be projecting onto me." And when there is social stigma, even if there is not a person with that particular disability or quality present, we do well to oppose any social stigma and instead encourage people to stop chasing the categories and talk to the individual and find out what they can do, because they may completely surprise you. They may be the next Mandy Harvey or Helen Keller or Louis Braille, who created the Braille alphabet for people who are visually impaired. The biggest problem with social stigma is that it puts limitations on each other and insists that humanity will not rise above the levels it has already attained. When we become our own worst, I don't remember exactly who it was who said it, but the phrase, "We have found the enemy, and it is ourselves." We're the ones standing in our way of being holistically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, every way, creatively, every way you can think of, to be the most exceptional people the world has ever seen, instead of living within the limited notions that are defined by social stigma. And to the extent that we never get beyond that social stigma, there is a part of ourselves that the world will never see, and the world will never know, and all kinds of wonderful things that will never happen. I don't think anybody should be justifying that. I don't want to grow beyond what is because it's too uncomfortable, it's too much work, it's too much. Fine, go live in a closet if you want to. I don't think that's where life was intended to be. I don't think there's anything about being autistic or being visually impaired or being hearing impaired or any other disability one can name that means you shouldn't try something that is in your heart to do. When it comes to social stigma, it's everybody's individual choice, because I would not pretend for a moment there are not going to be costs. There are places that I have tried to live that I wasn't allowed to live because they didn't want somebody as creative and as eccentric or unusual, as unique as me to be there. They wanted everything to function just the way it's always been, and which if they had thought about it, I can't imagine why anybody would want to do that, because it's essentially saying we want to stagnate and die. We don't want to live and develop. We don't want to grow. And we don't want anything to be any more than it has already been. And there is so much life waiting for discovery. And so, and so much that is waiting for you and I to be present, the things we were born to bring to humanity. And if we are limiting ourselves by social stigma instead of tearing down social stigma everywhere it raises its ugly head, when we tear down social stigma, we tear down the walls that say humanity will never be any bigger than this, or whatever size we define. This is as far as humanity is ever going to go. There were people in the 17th century who thought that that was the answer to everything, that there was nothing more to be learned. And boy, am I glad we didn't listen to them. So, and I guess if someone is battling social stigma and needs somebody to stand by them and help them through it, call me. I'll stand up for you. And I'll tell the world to back off, because this person has a song to sing that is unique to them and is something all of you out there need to hear. Thank you so much for watching. I hope some of the things I've said have been helpful to you. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen. When fear and love were sown together, and there was life as we'd never known, and fear prevailed, and love grew stronger, and the rose that bloomed would only bloom in the place of thorns. It was forbidden, though love it is. Who could have known the price to pay for love like this? Oh, precious love that won't let go. As ages pass, I find at last the truth you know. When fear and love were sown together, and there was life as we'd never known, and fear prevailed, and love grew stronger, and the rose that bloomed would only bloom in the place of thorns. The time is passing, will we forget the depth of love that fear revealed and the life that lived? Oh, precious love that won't let go. As ages pass, I find at last the truth you know. When fear and love are sown together, there is life as we've never known, and fear prevails, and love grows stronger, and the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. When fear and love are sown together, and there is life as we've never known, and fear prevails, and love grows stronger, and the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. and the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. And the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. Hands holding hands can hold the world. Hearts holding hearts can live anew. My hand to yours and your heart to mine can make every dream come true.